She wasn't looking for love, not at 56, not in a foreign city, and definitely not from a man known as Korea's coldest CEO. But fate isn't polite, and love doesn't ask for permission. This is the story of Lorraine Adams, a bold, radiant woman who thought love had passed her by, and Han Myung-Dae, a powerful man who spent his life hiding behind duty, until the day he saw her laugh across a rooftop restaurant in Seoul and forgot why he came. Get ready for a love story that proves it's never too late, you're never too much, and real love waits until you're finally unafraid. Now, let's begin. The rooftop restaurant floated above Seoul like a glass jewel box, its walls wide open to the evening breeze, its lights soft enough to make the city shimmer behind them like a sea of diamonds. Jazz played low beneath the soft murmur of wine glasses and clinking silver. And at a corner table by the railing, Lorraine Adams was laughing, not politely, not gently, fully, unapologetically, the kind of laugh that came from deep in the belly and refused to hide. "Girl, no, he did not!" she exclaimed into her phone, fingers curled loosely around a stemless glass of plum wine. Her dark curls framed her face like a crown, a few silver strands catching the warm gold of the lights. Her skin glowed. A deep brown canvas kissed with the kind of confidence only time and experience could shape. Her best friend's voice chirped from the speaker. "Yes, he did. He brought his mother to our third date. Lorraine. Third. I should have known he was broken." Lorraine nearly choked on her wine. "Chile. Was she at least nice?" "She asked me if I planned on bleaching before the wedding." Lorraine's mouth fell open. Her laughter spilled over the edge of the table, drawing a glance from a nearby couple. She didn't care. "Oh no. See, that's why I stay single. I'm not about to fix anyone's emotional plumbing." "Still can't believe you flew all the way to Korea just to eat bibimbap alone," her friend teased. "I'm not alone," Lorraine said with a grin, gesturing with her chopsticks to her full plate. "I've got carbs, I've got spice, I've got a view, and I don't need some man-child asking if I'll tone it down in public." They both laughed again. Lorraine leaned back in her seat, red wrap dress hugging her curves just right, one heel casually slipping off her foot. She looked like a woman at peace, with herself, with life, with the decision to stay free. But peace has a funny way of getting interrupted. Downstairs, Han Myung-Dae adjusted the silver cufflink on his wrist with the kind of practiced grace that came from decades of boardrooms and banquets. He didn't want to be here. His younger sister, Yoon-seo, had insisted on setting him up again. "You're almost 60, she'd said, with that mother-hen tone that always made him feel like a scolded boy. "You run a billion-dollar group, but you've never figured out your personal life." He had declined the setup 5 times. She lied and said it was a meeting. Just coffee, business adjacent. Now here he was, walking through the sleek black and gold foyer of Maru 52, Seoul's trendiest rooftop dining space, with a name he'd forgotten and a smile he didn't mean to wear. "Reservation under Han," he told the hostess. "Ah, yes. The young lady is already at the table. This way, sir." He followed, jaw tight, ready to sit through another awkward hour of polite conversation with someone who saw him as a prize to win or a dragon to tame, until he reached the top of the stairs, until he saw her. Lorraine. He didn't know her name yet, but something in the sound of her laughter stopped him like a hand to the chest. She was luminous, not in a magazine cover kind of way, but in the way city lights look after a long day when you finally exhale, real, unfiltered, full. His blind date sat 3 tables over, polished, patient, already scrolling her phone, but he couldn't take his eyes off the woman in red, her curls catching the light, her voice teasing the air like smoke and melody. He didn't sit. He didn't speak to the hostess. He walked, past his assigned table, past the startled staff, and stopped at her table instead. Lorraine looked up just as he reached her, sensing the shift in energy like static before a storm. He was tall, taller than most men she'd met in Seoul, with sharply cut features and elegant silver at his temples. His tailored suit looked expensive but not flashy, understated, controlled, but his eyes, uncontrolled, burning. "Excuse me," he said, voice deep, smooth, unshaken. "Forgive me, but I think I just met the reason I was supposed to be here tonight." Lorraine blinked. The audacity, the nerve. The man had cheekbones like they were carved with intention and a jaw that could cut ribbon, but she didn't care. She wasn't new to charm. She had been loved by poets, lied to by professors, admired by strangers. She lifted a brow, lips tugging into a sly smile. "Flattery is cheaper than dessert, mister, and I already ordered cake." The hostess hovered, panicked. "Sir, your table." He raised a hand gently, eyes never leaving Lorraine. "Cancel it." Lorraine tilted her head, intrigued despite herself. "So, what's your angle, Romeo?" "No angle," he said simply. "Just regret that I didn't walk in 5 minutes sooner." Her phone buzzed. Her friend was still on the line. "Who is that?" her friend whispered. Lorraine slowly set the phone face down. "I don't know yet," she murmured. Then to him, "Fine. You've got 2 minutes. Sit, start talking, and make it count." Myung-Dae sat across from her like a man settling into something dangerous and thrilling. And Lorraine Adams suddenly found herself wondering if she just met the one man who could make her forget every reason she never believed in love. Seoul, 3 days later. Lorraine hadn't meant to remember him, but memory, like perfume, lingers in places you don't expect. Everywhere she went, the scent of roasted coffee on quiet mornings, the hush of the subway before dawn, the laughter of couples crossing the Cheonggyecheon stream, somehow reminded her of the man who had dared to stop her dinner with a line no man in his right mind should have tried. She told herself it was just the absurdity of it, that she only kept replaying it because she couldn't believe his audacity. Yet when she caught her reflection in the glass of a boutique window, lips curved in a faint smile, she knew it wasn't irritation keeping her thoughts busy. It was curiosity. Across the river, Han Myung-Dae stood in his penthouse office, staring at the city as if searching for her in it. He tried to work, tried to bury himself in the noise of finance reports and acquisition proposals, but every chart blurred into the curve of her smile. That laugh of hers. It didn't just echo, it stayed. He hadn't felt anything like it in decades, and it irritated him. Han Myung-Dae was not a man who entertained obsession. He scheduled emotions like meetings, short, strategic, and forgettable. Yet here he was, taking a detour every evening to the same rooftop restaurant, sitting at her table when no one was around, pretending it was coincidence. Until one morning, his driver caught him staring at a travel brochure she'd left behind. Jeonju Hanok Village, stay where history breathes. He'd overheard her say something about guest house charm and real wood floors that creak like honesty. So he found it, quietly, and the next morning, before the city woke, a delivery arrived at her door. Beautifully wrapped breakfast, mandu, steamed sweet buns, and a note written in delicate English. No name, just one line. "In case you skipped breakfast." Lorraine blinked down at the tray. For a long time she said nothing. Then she laughed, softly, disbelieving. "Lord, this man can't be serious." Her host peeked around the corner. "A gift, maybe? Or an ego with good taste," she murmured, closing the door. But as she lifted a dumpling, her fingers trembled slightly. She wasn't used to being seen with this kind of gentleness. Not at her age. not by a stranger who didn't seem to want anything in return. That afternoon, her phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. Han Myung-Dae here. There's a museum gala tonight. Modern art meets memory lane. Will you come? Lorraine stared at the message, then typed back, "You're bold for someone who doesn't know if I even like art." The reply came instantly, "Then I'll like it for both of us." She smiled despite herself, but her thumb hovered over the keyboard before she finally wrote, "No, thank you. Some things are better admired from afar." He didn't reply, and for the rest of the evening, the city lights seemed to dim a little quieter. Flashback. Chicago, 1994. Lorraine stood in front of a mirror, veil pinned, bouquet trembling in her hands. Her fiancé, Philip, was late. The music had stopped twice. Her mother's smile had turned brittle. When the phone rang, she knew before anyone said it. Philip had gone through with the flight to Paris, with someone more proper. The word echoed in her skull for years. Proper skin, proper tone, proper family. Lorraine had smiled through the shame, tore up the invitations, and built her empire from scratch instead. Love? She'd buried it under layers of laughter and travel, until Seoul, until him. Back to present. Yoon-seo slammed the door to her brother's office so hard the glass rattled. "You humiliated me," she snapped, storming across the marble floor. "Do you have any idea what you did, Myung-Dae? She was a minister's daughter. I told her you'd be there." "I was there," he said evenly, not looking up from his desk. "Just not at her table." She froze. "You..." He finally lifted his gaze. Calm, dangerous. "I told you, Yoon-seo. Stop arranging my life like a business merger. I'm not an asset for you to manage." Her jaw tightened. "Then explain to me why half the restaurant staff is whispering about you and some tourist? Because they have good taste." He turned back to his paperwork. "Appa!" she hissed. "You can't do this." "The family name?" He stood. The shift in air made her flinch. "I've carried this family name longer than anyone else has respected it," he said quietly. "If a woman with laughter like summer storms wants to ruin it, I'll let her." He walked out, leaving Yoon-seo speechless. She didn't see the faint smile tug at his lips. That night, the Seoul Museum of Contemporary Art gleamed like a jewel. The gala was a showcase of elite names, silk gowns, champagne, and murmured deals disguised as compliments. Myung-Dae stood near the main exhibit. Moments in Motion, a set of paintings that mirrored time through light. He'd come because, despite her refusal, a foolish part of him hoped she might still appear. He sipped his drink, watched the doors, told himself he was ridiculous, until a hush moved through the room. Heads turned, murmurs rose, and then she appeared. Lorraine Adams, in a floor-length black gown that shimmered when she walked. Her hair was swept up, a single curl brushing her shoulder. Every step she took was deliberate, like the music had changed to match her rhythm. She looked straight at him, and Myung-Dae, impossibly composed Han Myung-Dae, forgot how to breathe. She reached him, eyes glinting like mischief and moonlight. "I thought you'd like the dress," she said. "You said red was unforgettable, but tonight, I wanted to show you what unforgettable really looks like." He stared, speechless for the first time in years. Then, voice low, almost reverent, "You were supposed to stay away." Her lips curved. "You were supposed to matter less." They stood there, the crowd fading into blur. Two people too old for games, too young to stop feeling. And when the camera flash went off somewhere behind them, capturing the moment that would soon flood tabloids and start the storm, they didn't even notice. Because in that instant, neither of them cared who was watching. The man who wasn't supposed to matter had just become the one she couldn't stop thinking about. Night over Seoul. The city pulsed like a living thing, neon veins running through black glass and silver rain. Cars whispered by, street lights blurred into streaks of color reflected across the wet pavement. Inside a sleek black sedan, Lorraine sat in the passenger seat, her red wrap coat draped over her knees, the window slightly open to let the cool air in. Jazz spilled softly from the speakers, an old Chet Baker tune, haunting and tender. Her head leaned against the window, eyes half closed. The city rolled by like a dream she didn't want to wake from. Myung-Dae drove in silence, one hand on the wheel, the other resting lightly on the console between them. His tie was loosened, his sleeves rolled just above his wrist, the first visible crack in his usual armor. Neither had said much since the gala. They didn't need to. The air between them carried too much already. Electricity, curiosity, and the kind of longing both were too old to mistake for coincidence. Lorraine finally spoke, voice low. "So this is what Seoul looks like when it forgets it's supposed to behave." He glanced at her, half smiling. "You make it sound human." "Maybe it is." She turned to him. "Maybe it just needed someone to drive it after dark." He didn't laugh. His eyes stayed on her longer than was safe. Maybe it did. They crossed the Han River Bridge, the reflection of the skyline glimmering beneath them. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Myung-Dae said quietly, almost to himself, "You know, I've been surrounded by people my entire life. Assistants, investors, shareholders, board members. Noise, always noise." Lorraine looked at him, studying the man behind the empire. He continued, voice lower now, "But I've never wanted to hold a single hand. Not once, until you." The confession landed between them like thunder muffled by velvet. Lorraine's breath caught. Her eyes darted toward the window again, as if the city lights might offer her an escape. She laughed softly, too lightly. "You don't even know me, Myung-Dae. I know enough." "What's enough?" "That when you laugh," he said, "I stop hearing everything else." The car went silent again. The music faded to the sound of rain tapping gently against the windshield. Lorraine could feel her pulse in her throat. She wanted to say something clever, something to break the tension. But words failed. He stopped the car outside her guest house. The narrow street was quiet, lined with hanging lanterns that swayed in the night wind. She unbuckled her seatbelt slowly, eyes down. "Thank you for the ride. Is that all it was?" he asked. Her hand froze on the door handle. He leaned closer. Not enough to touch, but enough that she could smell the faint trace of his cologne. Cedar, rain, and something warmer. Her heart raced in protest. "Myung-Dae, this..." But he interrupted softly. "Don't ruin it with logic." She turned her head, and for a suspended second, they just looked at each other. The air between them was too heavy for words. Then his hand brushed the side of her face. Barely a touch, a question more than a claim. Lorraine's breath trembled. He kissed her. It wasn't the soft, polite kind of kiss adults exchange out of curiosity. It was unguarded, real, the kind that slips past every wall and finds the place that forgot how to be touched. Her hands found his collar. His fingers traced her jaw. Time bent. When she finally pulled away, her voice was shaky. This is just a travel romance," she whispered. "You'll forget me when the trip ends." He looked at her like she just told him the sky was optional. "Lorraine," he said slowly, "you're not something I could forget. You're the only thing that's made sense in years." She stepped back, needing space. "You're mistaking gratitude for feeling. Then why are you shaking?" That stopped her. He didn't press, didn't chase, just gave her that steady, unreadable gaze that saw too much. "Good night, Lorraine." He watched her disappear into the guest house courtyard, the door closing quietly behind her. Only then did he let out the breath he'd been holding since the moment their lips met. The next morning, Seoul woke up to gossip. Headlines on morning tabloids blurred across digital screens and cafe newspapers. Han Sung Group CEO seen escorting mystery woman. Foreign woman rumored to be close to Han Myung-Dae. Han CEO with foreign lover? The photos were grainy, taken from across the street, but the angles were unmistakable. Her red wrap coat, his loosened tie, their faces inches apart under the glow of lanterns. Myung-Dae stared at the images in silence as his assistant hovered nervously in the doorway. "Sir, the PR team suggests a statement. Something dismissive. Maybe call it..." He raised a hand. "No." "Sir?" "No denial," he said evenly, setting the tablet down. "I'm not ashamed of who I was with." The assistant blinked. "But sir, the board..." "I'll handle the board." When the man left, Myung-Dae turned to the window. Outside, the city bustled with its usual rhythm. But tonight, it would buzz with whispers. He didn't care. What bothered him wasn't the rumors. It was the silence from Lorraine. Meanwhile, across town, Lorraine sat at a cafe, the same headlines open on her phone. Her heart pounded as she scrolled. Her photo, their photo. Her breath hitched between anger and disbelief. She told herself she didn't care, that this was exactly why she never let men get close. But beneath the practiced calm, something trembled. She whispered to herself, "This can't be love. It's too loud." Then she closed the screen, gathered her things, and walked out into the noise of Seoul, trying and failing, not to miss the quiet he carried. Han Sung Group Headquarters, 34th floor, Seoul. The boardroom was tense. Glass walls, polished chrome, the quiet kind of expensive that made people nervous to breathe wrong. 12 men, 1 woman, all staring at the man at the head of the table. Han Myung-Dae adjusted the silver watch on his wrist, not because he was impatient, but because they were. "Mr. Han," said the chairman of International Partnerships, folding his hands, "we've worked hard for decades to cultivate Han Sung's image. We understand privacy," added another, "but these rumors, they're disruptive." "She's not Korean," a third said, too polite to look guilty. "She's not even based here," someone else added, voice colder. Myung-Dae said nothing. Another board member cleared his throat, voice low and rehearsed. "If you continue this dark association, sir, investors may interpret it as a shift in vision. We've already had 3 calls regarding the photographs." Still silence. Then Myung-Dae leaned back in his chair, smooth, unbothered, deadly calm. "So let me understand," he said, eyes slowly sweeping the room. "You're saying our stock value depends on who I eat dinner with?" "No one's judging your private life," the chairman said quickly, "but perception matters. Our family values, our cultural image." "My family," Myung-Dae interrupted, voice quiet but iron firm, "is not this board. Elsewhere. Bukchon Hanak Village." Lorraine stood in the garden of her guest house, wrapping a scarf around her shoulders as the wind teased the edge of her dress. The city air had a strange weight today. Too many stares, too many whispers, too many phone cameras snapping when they thought she wasn't looking. She opened her inbox, 4 interview requests, 1 brand inquiry, 2 hate emails, and 1 message from Myung-Dae. "Don't run. Not from them. And not from me." She didn't answer. Instead, she took a walk to clear her head, found herself halfway to Samcheong-dong before she realized she wasn't alone. A voice behind her, soft, clipped, laced with familiar judgment. "Miss Adams." Lorraine turned slowly. Yoon Seo stood a few steps away. Tailored coat, designer handbag, that kind of rich woman composure that didn't ruffle even in strong winds. They stared at each other in silence. "I'd say nice to see you," Lorraine said, "but it feels a bit too soon for sarcasm." Yoon-seo stepped closer. Her tone was polite, painfully so. "Do you know what you'll cost him?" Lorraine's smile faded. Yoon-seo continued, "The board is on edge. Foreign investors are already threatening to pull. You're disruptive. You don't blend." Lorraine folded her arms. "Did you come all this way to call me unblended?" "I came to ask you to be honest. If you care about him at all, walk away." There was no slap, no drama. Just two women standing in the truth. Different languages, same war. Lorraine's voice was quiet, steady. "And do you know what it costs a woman to never be chosen?" Yoon-seo blinked. Lorraine's gaze didn't waver. "To always be someone's almost? To be powerful in the room but invisible when the lights come on? I've paid that price in full. I won't apologize for finally being seen." For a heartbeat, nothing moved. Then Lorraine stepped past her and walked away. But that night, she packed her bags. The next day, Seoul International Culture Forum. Lorraine was a guest panelist. The room was filled with scholars, diplomats, and corporate heads. The topic, designing cultural bridges through collaboration. She'd almost canceled, but professionalism wouldn't let her. As she sat on stage, answering a question about cross-cultural empathy, something shifted in the room. Heads turned, phones came out, gasps. Lorraine looked toward the back. There he was, Han Myung-Dae, walking down the aisle of the auditorium like he owned the ground it was built on. No security, no announcement, no permission. Just power wrapped in elegance. He walked straight to the stage, ignoring the moderators, stopped in front of her, looked at her like she was oxygen, looked at the crowd like they didn't matter. Then he turned to the microphone. "Forgive me for the interruption. I promise to make it brief." The moderators glanced at each other in alarm. He continued, "For 30 years, I've been building a company you all respect, Han Sung Group. Global partnerships, cultural investments, domestic expansion. You call it vision. You call it legacy." He paused. "But I didn't build all this to impress people who hate joy." The crowd rippled. "I built it," he said, voice steady and sure. "So when I finally met someone worth keeping, I wouldn't be too ashamed to hold her hand." The silence that followed was thunderous. Then, without another word, he turned back to Lorraine. Hand extended. Every camera in the room flashed. She didn't move, not at first. Then her fingers closed around his, quietly, defiantly. Together, they walked off stage, out into the chaos, the whispers, the war. But they walked like it didn't matter. Because when a man like that chooses you in public, you no longer live in anyone else's shadow. Seoul. 5 days after the panel. He had checked his phone 17 times since dawn. 17. He'd counted. Not because he was impatient, not because he was insecure, but because Lorraine had vanished. No replies, no pings, not even a scene. Not since the moment they stepped off that stage together. Fingers entwined, breath shared in defiance of everything. The moment the cameras followed them into the car. The moment he turned to her in the back seat and said, "Let me protect you." She had smiled faintly, said nothing, then disappeared into Seoul's endless lights. The silence settled into Myung-Dae's chest like ash. He stopped taking meetings, ignored texts from Yoon-seo, snapped at his assistant for breathing too loud. And at night, when he finally closed his eyes, his father came, not in a ghostly vision, not as a warm memory, but as a sharp, disapproving figure, pressed suit, thunderous voice, immovable expectation. You weren't born to be happy, his father's voice echoed in his sleep. You were born to carry the name, not rewrite it. Myung-Dae woke in a cold sweat, chest tight. The name. The name that had weighed on him like iron all his life. He had carried it into rooms where no one loved him, only feared him. Carried it into mergers, contracts, and handshakes that cost him friends. Carried it into loneliness. But with Lorraine, he hadn't felt like a Han. He'd felt like a man. A man who once laughed at the sound of her telling him off over seafood. A man who once forgot his speech mid-sentence because she walked into a room wearing the dress he said he dreamed about. A man who hadn't felt empty. Hansung Tower. Private hallway. Yoon Seo stood outside Myung-Dae's office, arms crossed. The door was locked. The man inside hadn't taken her calls in 3 days. She exhaled slowly, then pulled her phone and opened the file she discreetly asked his executive assistant to send. Lorraine Adams. Background security brief, prepared weeks ago for precaution. She scrolled. Emergency contact, Gracie K. Thomas, Chicago, Illinois, mobile +1. She tapped call. The phone rang. Hello, came a suspicious voice. Gracie. Who's this? My name is Yoon Seo Han. I'm Myung-Dae's sister. Please don't hang up. Pause. I'm listening. I think Lorraine's about to leave, and I think she won't listen to me or him, but maybe she'll listen to you. Another pause. Then, I'm gonna need an address, an extra legroom. Send me your airline preference, Yoon Seo said, already typing. He'll pay in roses. Meanwhile, Incheon guest house. Lorraine sat on a rooftop wrapped in a hoodie and a wool blanket, her hair pulled into a lazy bun. Her hands gripped a cup of tea gone cold hours ago. The Seoul skyline blinked in the distance, close but unreachable. She'd left because it all felt too much, too big, too exposed, too real. She left because she needed to breathe without cameras and whispers and questions like, what does she want from him? Why her? What's she doing in a world that wasn't built for her? Her silence wasn't rejection. It was survival, but it hurt. And that's what scared her most. Not the rumors, not Yoon Seo, not even the boardroom threats. It was how deeply she already missed him. How his stillness made her feel like the most thrilling sound in the world. How his fingers traced her hand like it was a confession. Then came the knock. She didn't expect anyone, until she opened the door and found her best friend from Chicago, Gracie, standing there with luggage in one hand and judgment in her eyes. Girl, Gracie said, I didn't fly 13 hours just to let you ruin the one good love story you've got. Lorraine blinked. How did you find me? Yoon Seo called me. Said it was time someone told you the truth who didn't wear Armani or carry guilt. Lorraine stared at her. She doesn't hate you, Gracie added gently. She's just scared he'll lose everything for you. Lorraine exhaled. Are you? Lorraine didn't answer. So Gracie walked in, kicked off her shoes, and flopped onto the bed like she owned Korea. You want my opinion? No, Lorraine muttered. You're getting it anyway. Gracie leaned forward, eyes serious now. You're not crazy for wanting this, Lorraine. You're just not used to being loved out loud. Lorraine looked down at her hands. And maybe you think it's too late, Gracie said more gently. That wanting something now makes you weak. But you've carried everything. Everyone. Maybe this is just the first time someone wants to carry you. Lorraine's eyes welled, throat tight. Parties teeth, it's months. Hansung Group Headquarters, 11:42 a.m. Myung-Dae sat in his office, unmoving, staring at the last message he dared to send. He'd written and deleted versions all morning. This was the only one he didn't regret. If I was younger, I'd write poetry. If I was braver, I'd beg. But I'm just a man, waiting for the woman who lit up his silence. He hit send, then let the phone slide face down. 30 minutes later, the elevator chimed. His assistant looked up, startled. But the door opened, and there she was. Lorraine. Wool coat. No makeup. No dramatic entrance. Just there. Myung-Dae stood from behind his desk, breath locked in his lungs. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. She walked across the office slowly, stopped in front of him, and for a moment, just looked. He looked exhausted, fragile in a way no one else would see, like she was the only thing holding his world together. Her fingers reached for his hand. He pulled her into his chest, tight, trembling. No kiss, no words, just that deep, soul-wrapping hold that says, I'm still here. I still choose you, even in the silence. And they stood there, CEO and woman, empire and heart, wrapped in the stillness they both had tried to outrun. Seoul. 4 weeks later. Love was no longer a secret. At first, it was a ripple, a headline, a photo here, a rumor there. Then it became a wave. Han, CEO's mysterious woman, returns. Ageless love. Who is the woman who softened the king of Seoul? Designing romance. American woman opens gallery with Han's shadow behind her. Lorraine didn't answer questions. She didn't grant interviews. She didn't need to. She let her work speak instead. The gallery. Nestled in the heart of Seoul, where tradition whispered through alleyways and art galleries bloomed like secret gardens, Lorraine opened Studio 27, a boutique design space that fused contemporary color with ancestral grace. Locals wandered in, expecting imported trends. They found legacy. Her gallery was soft in lighting, loud in emotion, upholstered benches in kente patterns, handmade ceramic lamps etched with scripture in Hangul and cursive English, storylines tucked into every corner. Opening day, Seoul's elite came. Critics, fashion writers, socialites, and they whispered, she doesn't act like she's new here. She doesn't bow. She doesn't apologize. Because Lorraine wasn't here to bow. She was initially here for fun. Now she was here to build. What no one knew was that Han Myung-Dae had anonymously funded it all. Through a silent foundation, no ceremony, no plaque, no receipts with his name. Just her dream, quietly carried on his shoulders. Meanwhile, Hansung Tower. Myung-Dae reviewed the quarterly reports, untouched espresso cooling beside him, his phone screen open to the gallery's website. He didn't need recognition. Watching her move through that space, laughing with curators, explaining textures, touching souls, that was enough. But the part that surprised him most wasn't how proud he felt. It was how light he'd become. As if letting her in had finally unclenched the fist he'd made of his heart decades ago. That evening, Han River Walkway. The skies over Seoul were threatening rain. The clouds pulled low like the curtain before a confession. Lorraine wore a deep blue trench, curls pinned half up. He met her at the Riverside Park. No driver, no bodyguard. Just him, just her, just air. I saw what you did, she said without turning. What did I do? She glanced over at him. Studio 27, that anonymous foundation. He blinked slowly. You always were too smart for PR secrets, she smirked. So you were planning to watch me win in silence? I was planning to make sure you never had to ask. She stopped walking, looked up at him. You know they still talk about us. I know. They say you're slipping. That love's made you soft. He stepped closer, hands sliding gently into the pockets of his coat. "They're right." She raised an eyebrow. "You're not going to defend yourself?" He took a breath. Let the silence settle. Then he said, "Before you, I ruled rooms. But I never moved anyone. I was a monument, unbothered, respected, alone." She swallowed. He continued, "If loving you made me soft, then I welcome the ruin." Before she could respond, a drop landed on her cheek, then another, and then it poured. Rain fell like confession, sudden, undeniable. People around them scattered, umbrellas popping open, coats pulled tighter. But they stayed still. Lorraine laughed and threw her arms up. And of course, no umbrella. He stepped closer, water already soaking into his collar. Then, in one motion, he slid out of his suit jacket and draped it over her shoulders. She looked up at him, confused. "You'll get drenched," he smiled. "Let them talk." "I used to fear the storm." He leaned in, eyes fixed on hers. "Now I chase it, if it smells like you." Her breath caught. And then, right there on the river path, beneath the pouring sky and Seoul's blinking skyline, he kissed her, slowly, deeply, like a man making a vow with his mouth. It wasn't desperation. It wasn't ceremony. It was fire in the rain. Later, as they walked back toward the street, soaked and laughing, Lorraine whispered, "You didn't have to cover me with your jacket." He glanced down at her. "I wasn't covering you," he said. "I was claiming you." Top, Seoul, 2 weeks later. The storm hadn't ended. It had simply changed direction. What started as tabloid curiosity had become full-blown corporate warfare. Every headline seemed written with a blade. Han CEO's foreign affair costs investors confidence. Han Sung Group stock drops amid rumors of internal division. Is love weakness? Analysts debate the downfall of Korea's coldest titan. Behind closed doors, executives whispered. Investors plotted. Rival companies circled like vultures waiting for a stumble. And through it all, Han Myung-Dae stayed calm. Too calm. To the public, he looked like a man untouched by scandal. But behind the calm, every night, he returned to an apartment that no longer smelled like her perfume. Lorraine had moved out of the Hanok guest house. She'd left no note. Just silence. Again. Incheon coastline. Morning. Lorraine stood on the sand, the ocean wind tangling her hair. She was tired. Not the kind that sleep could fix. The kind that comes from loving someone who stands at the center of a hurricane. She stared at her phone, thumb hovering over his name. Don't do it, she told herself. He's fighting too much already. She loved him enough to walk away before the storm took them both. But love was cruel that way. It demanded honesty even when honesty hurt. So she texted, I can't watch you be destroyed for me. You don't owe me your crown. And she powered off the phone before she could regret it. Seoul, Hansung headquarters. The boardroom was packed, every seat filled, every whisper sharpened to cut. A coup was brewing, not with shouting, but with smiles. The kind of corporate murder that came disguised as a vote of concern. Myung-Dae sat at the head of the table, hands folded, suit dark as judgment. An investor from New York cleared his throat. Mr. Han, our concern isn't moral, it's practical. The market is nervous. Perhaps it's time to consider stepping back for a season until this situation stabilizes. Someone else nodded. You could appoint a temporary chair. Show shareholders that Hansung still values decorum. Decorum, Myung-Dae repeated quietly, as if testing the taste of the word. He stood slowly. The scrape of his chair against marble sounded like thunder in the silent room. His voice was low but carried with the weight of a gavel. Do you know what I see when I look around this table? No one answered. I see men who think power is reputation. That legacy is numbers on a screen. He began walking the length of the table, every step deliberate. But I didn't build this company to hide behind other people's expectations. He stopped at the head again, looked each man in the eye. If I lose this company for loving her, then let it burn. Gasps rippled across the room. But you will never say I hid her. For a heartbeat, silence. Then chaos. Phones buzzed. Someone tried to call PR, but it was too late, because standing just outside the glass wall, unnoticed until now, was a line of journalists who'd been waiting for a press update. And they'd heard every word. The footage hit the internet within minutes. Online, 3:22 p.m., KST, hashtag Han CEO confession, hashtag ageless love, hashtag let it burn. Clips spread like wildfire. Koreans who once mocked him now applauded. Americans called it the speech that redefined honor. Women of every age filled comment sections with hearts and tears. He didn't just love her, he respected her. If this is scandal, may we all be scandalous. Real men don't hide real women. By evening, Han Sung Group's stock rebounded 8%. By night, every major news outlet called it the most romantic act of defiance in Korean corporate history. That same night, Han Sung office, Yoon Seo found her brother standing by the window, city lights reflecting against the glass. She said nothing for a moment, then softly, "Oppa." "I was wrong." He turned. Her eyes were wet. "You looked happy. Not strategic, not composed, just happy. I haven't seen that in 20 years. He smiled faintly. "I was starting to forget what it looked like." She nodded toward the door. "Then go find her before you forget again." 2 hours later, Seaside Village. Lorraine sat on a bench overlooking the ocean, notebook in her lap. She hadn't drawn all week. Every wave seemed to erase what little piece she tried to sketch. Then she heard footsteps behind her, slow, heavy, familiar. She didn't need to turn. "You're supposed to be at war," she said softly. "I was," he replied. "I surrendered." She turned then, and there he was, hair damp from the mist, eyes darker than the sea. He reached into his coat pocket and set something beside her. A simple ring, silver, clean, elegant. "No press," he said. "No boardroom, just us." Her breath trembled. "Myung-Dae." "You were right," he interrupted. "You shouldn't have to watch me be destroyed. But I realized something. I'd rather burn with you than be safe alone." Her eyes flooded. The ring gleamed between them, small but blazing. "I don't need to be chosen by the world," she whispered. "Just by you." He smiled, tired, unguarded, and entirely human. "Then stop running." She stood. The ocean roared around them, and when she stepped into his arms, the world went quiet. They didn't need vows or witnesses. The sea witnessed enough. When he kissed her, it wasn't just victory, it was homecoming. Two souls, seasoned, scarred, stubborn, finally meeting where war ended and love began. Late afternoon, Jeju Island rooftop. The sky stretched open like a silk ribbon, flushed with gold and lavender, streaked with pink that melted into soft navy. The rooftop was quiet. No cameras, no media, no orchestra, just light, breeze, and a table set for 12. The floor was lined with white petals. Small lanterns flickered, and overhead, string lights swayed gently, catching the last of the sun like blessings. Lorraine stood near the edge of the rooftop barefoot. Her dress flowed around her like whispered peace. No veil, no train. Just her, radiant, bold. Her natural curls crowned her head with quiet power, the silver threads shimmering under sunset. She didn't cry when she saw the view. She cried when she saw him. Myung-Dae stood by the flower arch with his shoes already off. He was in a charcoal linen suit, shirt unbuttoned at the top. No tie, no stiffness, just the man. Not the CEO, not the heir, just her man. Their friends sat in silence, moved beyond words. Gracie, Yunseo, his driver of 20 years, her old art mentor from Chicago, a few chosen souls who had watched these two love, break, rebuild, and finally choose joy out loud. There was no officiant, just them. He reached for her hand, and she took it, like it had always been hers. He spoke first, voice low, steady, unrehearsed. I was born to inherit the name, the pressure, the empire. I lived in rooms where legacy mattered more than laughter, but I waited my whole life to belong. And Lorraine, I belong to you. She blinked back tears, then answered, I thought I was too old. I thought I'd missed it. I thought love had walked past me again and again. But now I know. Love didn't pass me by. It waited until I was ready to set the world on fire. A soft wind moved through the lanterns. Petals danced across the floor like confetti from heaven. Neither of them moved to kiss yet, because this wasn't a performance. This was a sacred moment. Then, with no music, no cue, no announcement, Lorraine whispered, "Dance with me." He didn't ask if she meant now. He simply took her hand. Barefoot under the string lights, they swayed, slow, reverent, like two people who had earned this joy, like time had finally decided to let them breathe in rhythm. He pressed his forehead to hers. You look like the part of my life I never thought I'd be allowed to have. She smiled against his cheek. And you feel like the reason none of the others ever fit. They didn't care who watched, because for the first time in their lives, they weren't performing. They were existing in love. No shame, no audience, no apology. Later, the rooftop, the string lights glowing warmer, the sky deepening behind them, and Myung-Dae and Lorraine, barefoot, forehead to forehead, still dancing, as if the world had always belonged to them and just needed time to catch up. Love didn't find me when I was young. It found me when I was finally unafraid. The end. She didn't need rescuing, and he didn't need softening. They simply needed to be seen, chosen, held, without shame. They weren't 20. They weren't perfect, but they were ready to burn together if that's what truth required. And when the world called it scandal, they called it legacy. Because in the end, love didn't come when they were younger. It came when they were finally unafraid. Until the next story, don't wait for perfect. Just open the door.